If you look very closely at the videos from the big crowning day of King Charles, you will see something very strange that most people missed. As the king walked by, every person in the room bowed their heads or curtsied to show respect. But when Camilla, the woman who was becoming queen, passed by those same people, nobody moved a single muscle. It was like everyone in the room suddenly turned into a stone statue at the exact same time. They did not move their arms, they did not move their legs, and they did not bow. They just stood there with serious faces, looking straight ahead. This wasn't an accident. They were doing this because they were very, very angry with her. Something big was happening behind the scenes that the cameras were not allowed to show you. Right now, on the Palace Vale, we are going to tell you the true story about the most famous family in the whole world. We have a story today that is so huge, it changes everything we thought we knew about the king and his queen. There is a giant secret hidden behind the heavy, old wooden doors of Buckingham Palace, and this secret could change who has the power in the royal family forever. People are whispering in the long, quiet hallways that King Charles has just made the hardest choice of his life. He decided to take the beautiful crown that belonged to Queen Camilla and give it to Catherine, who many people know as Kate, the Princess of Wales. Before we get into all the juicy details of how this huge change happened, please take a quick second to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, The Palace Vale. We work very hard every single day to bring you these secret stories from inside the palace, and your support means the world to us. You definitely do not want to miss what is coming next because this royal drama is just getting started. Now, let's talk about why the king was so upset that he decided to take a crown away from his own wife. It all started when he found out about a secret plan that was being made right under his nose. He discovered that Camilla was trying to give her daughter, Laura Lopes, a lot more power inside the palace walls. Laura is Camilla's daughter from her first marriage, which means she is not the king's daughter. In the royal world, rules are everything, and the rules say that only certain people get to have royal jobs and power. This was not just a small family argument about who gets to sit where at dinner. It became a very scary threat to the old rules of who gets to be in charge of the country next. People who work in the palace say that Camilla got very upset when she talked to Charles about this in private. She was only trying to make sure her daughter had a good and safe future. But even though King Charles loves his wife very much, he knew he had to put the royal family and the country first. He decided that the ancient rules were more important than his marriage. He sent a message that was as cold as ice by deciding to take the crown away from her. Is this the end for Camilla's time in the spotlight? Will she have to stay in the dark while Catherine steps forward into the light? Like Catherine is becoming a leader much sooner than anyone ever expected. Inside the quiet and fancy rooms of Buckingham Palace, the walls are made of beautiful, cold marble. These walls have seen many kings and queens come and go for hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, they were watching a very quiet and very serious meeting take place. There were no bright camera flashes or loud cheering fans outside the windows this time. Palace did not even tell the news reporters that this meeting was happening. Everything was kept a total secret from the rest of the world. King Charles stood in the middle of a small, grand room. The golden lights hanging from the ceiling made his shadow look very long and dark on the floor. Since he officially became the king in 2023, he has tried very hard to make the royal family look honest, kind, and simple. He wanted the people of the world to trust them again. Now he had to deal with a big crack in his own family. To his left stood Queen Camilla. She had been through many years of people saying mean things about her, and she worked very hard to finally become the queen. On this day, she tried to look very calm and brave, but if you looked at her hands, you could tell she was very nervous. Behind her, you could almost feel the shadow of the big plans she had made for her daughter, Laura. Only 10 days ago, the king had found out exactly what she was trying to do. From them was Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Most people in the world call her Kate. On this day, Kate looked like the perfect person to be a future queen. She was standing very tall and quiet, and she looked very strong. Since she married Prince William back in 2011, almost everyone in Britain has grown to love her because she is always kind and does her job well. She was wearing a simple but very pretty dark dress, and she looked very respectful of the king. Kate knew that the crown she was about to receive was not just a piece of expensive jewelry made of gold and rocks. It was a symbol of very big power and a huge responsibility. She also knew that things were breaking apart inside the family she had joined. The king cleared his throat, and the sound seemed very loud in the quiet room. He slowly reached out and opened a small green box made of soft, fancy velvet. Inside the box was a famous crown with a huge, sparkling diamond called the Koh-i-Noor. Diamond is very famous all over the world, but some people think it is actually cursed. They say this because so many people have fought over it and had bad things happen to them throughout history. The king's hands were shaking just a little bit as he touched the cold, heavy gold of the crown. He made sure not to look at Camilla in the eye. He didn't want to see her sadness or her anger because she was his wife, and he still cared for her. At the moment, he had to act like a king, not just a husband. Everything the king did was very slow, almost like a movie playing in slow motion. He picked up the crown, and the shiny stones caught the light from the ceiling, sending sparkles all across the room. One of those sparkles hit Camilla right in the eyes. For a second, she held her breath, and you could see her chest moving up and down under her expensive silk dress. This was not just about losing a pretty hat to wear to parties. It was about losing her power and her place in the family. It was the king's way of punishing her without having to say a single word out loud. He was mad because she tried to bring her daughter Laura into the royal business, which is against the rules. The king thought this was a betrayal because only people born with royal blood are supposed to change the way the palace works. As King Charles walked toward Catherine, the air in the room felt very heavy, like a storm was about to break. Catherine bowed her head just the right amount to show the king she was ready for her new, big job. When the heavy crown finally touched her hair, her shoulders shook just a tiny bit. It was a huge, life-changing moment. It meant that the future of the royal family was now officially being given to the younger people. Camilla just stood there, and her face looked like it was carved out of hard, cold stone. Her eyes got small and sharp as she watched her daughter-in-law wear the crown that used to belong to her. This move was Charles telling everyone a very loud message. He was saying that nobody can try to grab power if they aren't the ones who are supposed to be king or queen next. The meeting ended just as fast as it had started. The palace helpers bowed and walked away into the dark, long hallways. Catherine did a small, elegant curtsy and walked away with a steady and proud pace. Only Charles stayed in the room all by himself. He started thinking about everything that had happened 10 days ago. It was the day his life changed. That was the day he saw the secret reports about Camilla and her daughter Laura. Those reports were the reason he had to make this very difficult choice. 10 days before that secret crown meeting, the palace looked very peaceful on the outside. The sun was shining on the grass and the tourists were taking pictures, but inside the king's private office, things felt very bad. On his big wooden desk, there was a dark blue folder that shouldn't have been there. This folder wasn't about world peace or helping charities. It was a report about people changing jobs and moving around inside the palace right under his nose. Charles sat back in his big chair, and his eyes looked very tired. He read the notes from his most trusted helpers. At first, he thought the things in the folder were not a big deal. He saw that Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter, had been coming to a lot of meetings about royal events. Her name was also being put on lists for big national parties where only the royal family usually goes. Charles liked Laura and always treated her like she was part of the family. But when he looked at all the small things together, they made a very scary picture. It looked like Laura was slowly and secretly trying to move into a position of real power. The king remembered having tea with Camilla at their home. He remembered how her eyes would shine and sparkle when she talked about how smart and helpful Laura was. Camilla would often say that the royal family was getting older and needed new young people to help with all the hard work. Back then, Charles just smiled and nodded. He thought it was just a mom who loved her daughter and wanted her to be nearby. But now, looking at the list of secret meetings Camilla had held with lawyers, he felt a cold shiver go down his back. The folder showed a very big and secret plan. A group of people was secretly writing new rules for the palace. They wanted to give official jobs and government money to family members who weren't actually supposed to be working royals. The main goal of this plan was to give Laura Lopes a real job with a lot of political power inside the palace. This was the exact opposite of what King Charles had promised the people. He had told the whole world that he would make the royal family smaller and cheaper so it wouldn't cost the taxpayers so much money. The king gripped the papers in his hand so hard that they started to wrinkle and tear. He stood up and looked out the big window. He could see the royal guards marching outside in their red coats. They looked the same as they always did. But inside the palace, the woman he loved more than anyone was trying to build her own little kingdom behind his back. He felt very sad and very disappointed. He felt like a guard who had finally found a hole in the wall he was trying to protect. He did not yell or call Camilla into the room right away. Instead, he took his favorite pen and drew dark lines under the names of the people who were helping her. Those lines meant that those people were going to lose their jobs very soon. The king's silence was much scarier than if he had started yelling. He closed the blue folder with a loud snap that echoed in the room. The sun was going down, and the red light made his face look very stern. Deep down in his heart, he knew he couldn't let this happen. If Laura got power now, it might cause big problems for Prince William and Catherine later on. Later that night, Charles picked up his phone. His voice sounded very serious and professional, like a boss talking to workers, not a husband talking to his family. He told his office to look at every single letter and every message that Camilla had sent in the last month. He wanted to know the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. When he hung up the phone, he felt very lonely. He knew that from that moment on, he could never fully trust Camilla ever again. While the rest of the palace went on with its normal, busy day, the king started a secret investigation. The long, grand hallways of Buckingham Palace were now full of people watching each other and whispering. There were no loud questions being asked. Instead, the king used a very small group of helpers he had known for a very long time. These were people he could trust with his life. He told them to find out exactly what Camilla was planning and who else was involved. In a small, dusty room in a far corner of the palace, there were stacks and stacks of old papers. A single lamp was turned on, and the helpers worked in total silence late into the night. They wore white gloves so they wouldn't get the important papers dirty. They looked at Camilla's calendar and compared it to her private dinners and phone calls. Bit by bit, like a big puzzle, the story started to come together. They found meetings that weren't on the official palace list. They found letters with Camilla's special royal stamp on them. These letters were sent to very important people in the government to tell them about Laura's new role before the king even knew about it. King Charles did not go into the room to help them, but he read their reports every single night before he went to sleep. Sometimes, he would stand alone in the dark and look at a picture of his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth. He felt like her ghost was watching him, telling him to do his duty and protect the crown. He felt very sad that his own family was using their private life to try and get more power. Things got even more tense when the helpers found a secret plan for Laura to go on official royal trips to other countries. This was not just Laura going along as a guest to have fun. The plan said that Laura would represent the Queen at important events. Usually, only the main royal family members like William or Kate are allowed to do that. This was a very big move that broke all the traditional rules. It was an attempt to make Laura look like a royal person before the public could even notice what was happening. The more the king's team looked, the more they saw how Camilla was running the entire show from the background. She had even tricked some of the palace helpers into thinking the king himself wanted this to happen. A cold, hard anger grew inside Charles. He realized he was being used as an excuse for plans that he never liked and never agreed to. Sometimes, he would see Camilla at dinner. He would keep his face straight and act normal, but it was very hard for him to even breathe. He watched her smile and pour the tea, and he wondered if she was being real or if she was just acting for him. He wasn't being weak by staying quiet for so long. He was waiting until he had proof that was so strong and so clear that she could not lie about it anymore. When the final report was finished, it was placed on the king's desk in a thick stack. It had copies of secret messages and hidden schedules. It had a list of every single person who had helped Camilla with her plan. The king looked at the name, Laura Lopes, written on the paper. He knew that to save the royal family and to keep Prince William and Kate safe, he had to do something that would hurt his marriage and his heart. That night, the light in his office stayed on until very late. He looked out at the bright lights of London and whispered to himself that he would not let anyone ruin the history of the royal family. The rules had to stay exactly the same, even if it meant he would be very sad and very alone for a while. The next morning, the sun came through the heavy curtains in long, golden stripes. It was finally time for the king to talk to Camilla. They sat together at a small, round table. They were close enough to touch each other, but they felt like they were miles and miles apart. Charles did not say anything at first. He just pushed the big blue folder across the table toward her. He watched her face very carefully. He saw her hand shake just a little bit when she touched the cover of the folder. He saw her face change for a split second, looking scared before she forced it to look calm and cool again. Camilla did not open the folder right away. Instead, she looked at her husband with angry, sharp blue eyes. She adjusted her pearls and sat up straight. In her heart, she truly didn't think she was doing anything wrong. She thought she was just being a good mom and looking out for her child. She thought Laura deserved to be important because she had stayed quiet and out of the way for so many years while the rest of the world talked about her family. When Charles finally spoke, his voice was very low and very firm. He didn't yell. He talked about rules, about boundaries, and about respect. He tapped his finger on the wooden table, and each tap sounded like a small hammer hitting a nail. He told her that a king can never put his personal feelings above the needs of his country. Camilla couldn't stay quiet anymore. She bit her lip and squeezed her hands together until her skin turned white. When Charles showed her the part of the report about Laura going on royal trips to other countries, she looked away. She couldn't look him in the eye. She looked at the old family photos hanging on the walls. In almost all of those photos, Laura was always standing a little bit to the side, away from the center. Camilla felt like she was just fixing a mistake from the past, but Charles saw it as a big lie and a betrayal of trust. The king gave her an ultimatum. That means he gave her a final choice with no other options. He said she had to admit she was wrong and immediately stop trying to give Laura an official job. He looked right into her eyes and made her choose between her daughter's career and her own place as the queen. Camilla stood up very slowly. She looked like she was carrying a very heavy bag on her shoulders. She didn't say she was sorry, but the way she grabbed her things and left the room showed that she knew she had lost the fight. She walked out, and the sound of her expensive shoes on the hard floor was very sharp and lonely. She looked defeated. She realized that for Charles, the crown and the rules would always be more important than his love for her. Charles stayed in that dark, quiet room all by himself. He didn't feel happy that he had won the argument. He just felt very empty inside. He knew that his marriage and his friendship with Camilla would never be the same again. After that big fight, the king and the queen barely spoke to each other for days. Charles decided he had to do something even bigger to show the whole world and the palace staff that he was the one in charge. He decided to take away the special crown that Camilla used. In the deep palace vault, where the most expensive and famous jewels in the world are kept behind thick metal doors, Charles stood alone. He looked at the crown Camilla had worn on the day they were crowned together. It was covered in thousands of tiny, sparkling diamonds. To most people in the world, it is just a very pretty and expensive object. But to the royal family, it is a symbol of who is the boss and who has the power. Taking it away from her was like telling Camilla that she was no longer part of the inner circle of power. Charles put on special white gloves to protect the shiny gold from his fingers. He felt very conflicted and sad. He knew that taking the crown would hurt Camilla's pride and make her feel ashamed. But then he remembered the secret plans for Laura and the way his trust had been broken, and he knew he had to be tough. At the same time, Camilla was sitting in her own room. She didn't want to look in the mirror because she knew she looked very sad and very tired. She knew that losing the crown meant that everyone who worked in the palace would soon find out she was in big trouble with the king. The king didn't tell the public people about this, but word travels very fast inside a palace. The people who used to follow Camilla around and help her started to stay away. They could feel the king's anger like a cold wind blowing through the halls. Camilla started to look like a shadow standing next to Charles. He didn't just hide the crown away in a dark box forever. He told the palace jewelers to clean it and make it look perfect for someone new. He wanted Catherine to have it. This was his way of showing that the future of the monarchy belonged to Kate and William, not to Camilla's daughter. Charles signed the official papers to move the crown to its new home. He didn't wait or change his mind. He knew he was doing something that almost nobody had ever done before in history. He was giving away this symbolic power early to make sure the family stayed stable and strong. That night, as he watched the crown being packed up into a secure case to be sent to Kate's house, Charles felt like he could finally breathe again. The bad plans were over. The crown was going to the person he trusted to protect it. The secret meeting to officially give Kate the crown happened very early in the morning when London was still covered in a thick gray fog. Inside a room with big glass walls, it was so quiet you could hear a clock ticking on the wall. This was not a fun party with music and dancing. It was a very serious transfer of power from one person to another. King Charles looked very tired, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He watched Kate walk toward him across the room. She looked very brave and very ready for this huge responsibility. When he finally placed the crown on her head, he felt a huge weight lift off his own chest. It was the end of a very long and very hard time for him. Kate was very calm and steady. When she felt the heavy gold and the cold diamonds on her head, she just pressed her lips together and took a deep breath. She didn't look over at Camilla. Camilla was standing back in the shadows of the room, not moving at all. Kate looked at her husband, Prince William, and they shared a look. They knew they were now the new team in charge of the family's future. Kate looked like the sun coming up after a very long, dark night. Camilla, on the other hand, looked like a statue made of pure loneliness. She wore a dark blue dress that almost made her disappear into the walls. Her face didn't show any emotion, but she was holding onto the back of a chair so hard that her fingers were turning white. She knew that her time as the most important woman in the palace was starting to fade away. Her dream of making her daughter a royal power was gone forever. Laura Lopes was no longer seen walking the halls of the palace. Her name was only found in secret files now. The palace felt quiet, organized, and disciplined once again. When everything was finally finished, King Charles walked out onto the big balcony. He watched the guards marching in the courtyard below. He felt like a gardener who had finally cut off the dead and sick branches of a tree to make sure the rest of the tree grew up strong and healthy. He was very sad about what happened with his wife, but he knew in his soul that he did the right thing for his country and his people. He felt that his mother, Queen Elizabeth, would be very proud of him for being strong and keeping the crown safe from harm. Kate stood there next to him, and her new crown sparkled brightly in the morning sun for everyone to see. A new era for the royal family had officially begun. Everything was back to the way it should be. The palace felt clean, strong, and ready for the future. Do you think King Charles was right to take the crown away from Camilla and give it to Kate? Did he do it to save the country, or is this just a very sad story of a man who is all alone at the top of the world? We really want to know what you think about this huge royal shakeup. Please tell us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below. We love reading what you have to say. If you enjoyed this secret story from behind the royal veil, please make sure to give this video a big like and share it with your friends who love royal news. And don't forget to subscribe to the Palace Veil so you never miss another secret story like this one. Also, you should definitely click on the next video you see on your screen right now to learn even more juicy secrets about the royal family. There is always more to discover, and we can't wait to see you in the next one.